Thank you very much everyone for coming, and a warm welcome to Wardown House. It's really lovely to have you here this evening. I'm really sorry for the delayed start. I think lack of petrol and poorly sore throats and things have prevented people from coming. We are going to have a fantastic talk this evening from Myrna and from Deborah, and we'll hand over shortly to them. But first of all, I have to do a few housekeeping things. So if it's your first visit to Wardown and you don't know where the loos are, they're just down by the side of the grand staircase here. So you just go through the door, the gents are straight ahead and the ladies are to the right hand side. We're not planning a fire alarm, so if the fire alarm should go off, it is real. We need to go out and through the front door or through the fire exit through the side there. We'll guide you out, and we need to meet in front of the front entrance by the letterbox until it's safe to come back in. And I think that's it on practical matters. Tonight's talk is part of our Windrush programme of events that we have here. We have a contribution to the Windrush, contributions from the Windrush Generation exhibition on now until the end of October. And as part of that, we also have tonight's talk, and we also have another talk coming up on the 13th of October by Alva Wilson, which is called Dress to the Nines, and that's all about fashion in the 60s, and Mary Kwan, about being dressed in your hat and finest clothing. I think that's going to be fantastic. So, thank you very much for coming today, and I'm going to hand over to Deborah.
So, tonight we're exploring identity via art vehicles of wax and water. It's a two-act event. The first act is water and the second act is wax. What I would like you to do to bear in mind this evening throughout the process is to consider, if you will, what the natural state of H2O is. Okay? And whilst you're considering the natural state of H2O, consider also then what is identity. Okay? I'm going to hand you over to Myrna.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
Yes, I'm Myrna Lloyd. I'm an artist, I'm a poet, and I'm a writer. So I'm going to try and combine all three in this talk this evening. So I'm going to start off with a poem, and it'll kind of put you in place of the Windrush, because I start off with my mother, 01, because she's outside the UK, and that's 01 for space and identity, and then we're going to go into a little bit about my identity, because it seems to change, but the one thing is constant is my inner soul. So regardless of my image, you might see me 1 minute looking one way, and the next minute I look a different way, but that's not my identity, that is just my looks. So, the poem for Wardown Museum, I didn't mean to say that. Okay, the poem. My mother came to England in 1952. It wasn't what she expected, but it's how her resilience grew. She stood upon a platform at Waterloo Station. A phone number in her suitcase was her most valuable possession. Within 2 days she found a job. She worked both day and night, while I grew in her belly banded tight. Children were not allowed, you see. It went against house rules. And so I was kept hidden from inquisitive eyes and fools. A fight for independence to get a home of her own, so that no one could threaten to throw her out or try to put her down. The Windrush generation fought with all they had to live a respectable existence, but resented, which was sad. Invited to glorious England, they felt pride at journey's end, but when they landed on British soil, they were treated like aliens. outsiders. Treated like an alien, she was foreign, she was different. Her skin was what was defining her in that moment. She learned long ago that differences were not the status quo. An alien in a foreign shell, banned from reaching her full potential. So that's that poem, and you'll see from my paintings that they have an alien-like quality, and that is because we have felt like aliens in this country. That one is Strangers in Our Midst, and that once again shows how people are treated like strangers most of the time. And that one is, it's a kind of how the woman is separated from the child. The child forms its identity from the mother, but the mother is estranged, so the father is with the child and separated by that spiritual image. And you can translate that image how you want. So, coming here tonight, I was saying that my identity is not my looks. People kind of think that the way you look is who you are, but we all know that the government treats us with numbers. We have our NHS numbers, we have our account numbers, we have our tax references, and it's almost as though we're just an indices, we're just a number, and our identity as a core identity doesn't really matter much. So I was trying to think about what identity did I want to create this evening? How did I want to look? And I'm thinking, So did I want to come here flamboyant? Did I want to come here feminine? Did I want to come here elegant? Did I want to go rough, like with my tracksuit? I mean, it was what kind of image did I want to portray this evening? And which image is my identity? And that's when I realised my identity isn't what I look like, because my identity is constant. It's not even my character, because my character is always evolving. So then I thought about, well, what about other people and how we're made to feel about our identity? And when we think about our parents that came here, and the Windrush family, I was thinking with my mother, they came here and England was their home. But because they were constantly felt unwelcome, it's almost like their identity was shaken, because where did they belong? They thought they belonged in England, because they were part of the Commonwealth. And then a few years later, when Maggie Thatcher brought out, changed the Race Relations Act, all of a sudden, whether you were born here or not, didn't mean you were British. You had to be the father, one of the parents had to be British, for the child who's born in this country to be British. And if, I know that they call them anchor children in America. So anchor children were when people from abroad, like from the Caribbean or from Africa, they would come to England just to have a baby, just so they could have a British baby, and they would use that baby so they could stay in the country. So they put a stop to that in America, and they've also put a stop to that here, even though it wasn't so obvious. So now they said, well, if you want to be British, one of your parents has to be born here, the child has to be born here, the grandparent has to be born here, and in some cases the great-grandparent. That's how far it has to go before you have a British identity. So we found our parents and and those of that generation kind of feeling a bit lost. And they obviously felt unstable, they tried to get their homes, and they're still told that they might have to leave. You've got people who are being deported even though they've been here for so long. And so you've got yourself in a situation where do we belong? What is our identity? Is our identity Black British? Is it Black Caribbean? I mean, there's so many classifications. And so you find yourself thinking, when you don't have an identity, it's almost like you feel a bit unstable, because it is your core is who you are. So if the government is telling you that you don't belong here, how does that make you feel? It makes you feel vulnerable. It makes you think, oh, where am I going to go from here? What am I going to do? So, I wrote a book called The Other Side of Tourism, and which was based on the impact of being born in a dual cultured environment, and that was under a project called Space and Identity. And I'm going to read this because it's a bit technical, but the concept behind 0-1 Space and Identity was to examine the effect of migration, which is 0, my mother, and any subsequent experiences of reintegration, a displacement, alienation, and or disillusionment that followed, and how those experiences impacted the next generation, which is me, and my children and my grandchildren. So 0 equates to the generation of our parents, i.e. those born outside Great Britain, and 1 equates to the first generation, those born in Great Britain. So, what is the impact of that? The impact is that when it's a bit like, I don't want to go over the same thing over and again, but it's that same thing where people came to this country hoping to feel a part of the UK, hoping to integrate, hoping to reintegrate, and it just didn't happen. Because of hostile environment policy that also made people feel more alienated. And it was also the reason why a lot of people have been deported, even though they're legally in this country. And when you're legally in this country, you were legal because when you came, those people that came from 1948, between 1948 and 1973, they didn't need a visa, they didn't need a passport, they were just like people born in this country. So there was no way they had the documentation that the Home Office was asking them to have and asking them to collate. And technically, they should have been able to get all of that information from their GPs, and they call it, if you've got the GP and you've been paying tax, which you often have, you paid your national insurance, that should have been enough. There shouldn't have been any of these people who had to dig up and look for 10 years worth, not even 10 years, 30 years worth of documentation and evidence. So when you've got people who came over in 1948, 1952, like my mum, and all of us, and they don't really travel. A lot of my mother's generation, what are the type that go on holidays? They're not like the Brits. Brits have a holiday every year. You know, us Caribbeans, we're more likely, I mean, you've got the younger ones who probably do, and you still have some, but the majority of my mother's age group, they didn't really take a holiday. They didn't really go on vacation every year, so they had no reason to use a passport. So when they realised that the Race Relations Act came in, not the Race Relations, the British Nationality Act came in, all of a sudden they're being asked, you know, where's your passport? And because they didn't have any and they didn't have the documentation to support it, that then left them in a precarious situation. My mother was fortunate. Before it became a big thing, she actually went to Spain, and that's when she knew that she wasn't a British citizen. And they were quite rude to her, but in the end she got it. But you had a lot of people who didn't travel, and because of that, they didn't have a British passport. Because of that, they were deemed to be undocumented. And when you think about why it's so important for people to be documented, it is about control. It is about measuring who is in the country. And so when they can't measure who's in the country, they feel as though they cannot control the status quo. So you've got a lot of people who are unfortunate and they have been deported. A lot of people died before they got the Windrush compensation because they couldn't get a job, they lost their job, they can't get a home. It's really terrible, that hostile environment policy, because if you want to rent a room, if you want to to buy a house, you can't. If you want to have a bank account, they've stopped that. If you want a driving license, you can't do that. You know, and they've told the employers not to employ people who have strange names. They don't say it in such a straightforward way, but it's implied, it's inferred in the way that they have to report. So they have to report to the Home Office everybody who hasn't got the documentation to show. So you've got people who, because they didn't have that documentation, they couldn't even get help, they can't get benefits. So they're vulnerable, really, really vulnerable. And these are people who had their homes. And they lost their homes because they lost their job. So that hostile environment policy isn't great at all. So I wanted to, I said the government gave me my identity. That was via the NHS number, national insurance number, tax reference, passport number, bank account number, driving license number, employee reference, and council tax reference. And I say that because if you don't have any of those documents, you're nobody. You do not exist as far as the government is concerned. And a lot of people don't realise how important it is to have those references. So as the government is concerned, we're not human beings. We're just numbers. And they don't. And when you think about us as, we're always saying, oh, you know, can't they relate? We're all human. It doesn't really matter. You could be a robot for all they care. All they want to know is the numbers. All they want to know is that you're trackable. All they want to know is that you're measurable. And if you're not trackable and not measurable, you don't exist. And when you're thinking about your identity and you're thinking about, oh, I'm just a number, if I want to go and do anything to do with the government, if I don't have a passport, you know, I can't do anything. I want to go to the bank account, they say, bring your passport, bring your driving license, bring 2 council tax bills. So you're just references, and that's also what gives you credibility with regard to finances and things like that. So I'm going to, I've got another poem here. Looks cannot be my identity because looks are temporary. Looks cannot be my character because my character is revolutionary. So is my identity numbers? Sedentary, calculable, measurable, those that the government gave me. Where's my identity? Simply an amalgamation of all the experiences that they gave me. And that is what your identity is really. It's what has made you, it's what is making you you. What is the core? What is your core? What doesn't change, whether or not it's your spirituality, and I think when you're thinking about identity, I'm not quite sure, Naz was talking about H2O. I can't wait to see how you relate that to identity. But it is about how fluid identity can be if you were to think about identity in the way that they make you feel. Some people think that if they haven't got an identity, some people believe that if they haven't got a purpose, they don't have an identity. So, and that is because you're made to feel as though you should be doing something, you should be more than what you are. And really, you are enough. Each one of us is enough. Each one of us, we don't have to prove that we exist because we are. And I think when you're thinking about your identity, you just have to remember your core being, and that is the one thing that is constant. And that's all I've got to say.
So the reason why I say man is Act 1 and she is water, because painting is oil, but water. Water enables you to paint. Yes. Water is also a key component of tea. Myrna, would you like to be at the table at the back? And if you'd like to nicely form a nice orderly, we can sample. Myrna, do you want to just quickly tell everybody about the Luton tea?
Yeah, let me do that. Okay, I actually run an inspirational herbal tea shop. It's in Luton Indoor Market. And what I've started doing is creating my own blend of teas. And they're all about building up resilience, your immune system, if you've got high blood pressure. So I've created a Luton tea, which the one I've made is medicinal, so you can't be gulping it down. So I've got little shots. But it's about, because I call it a Luton tea, because it's an amalgamation of flowers. It's got astragalus, it's got sage, it's got bay leaves, and it's got cloves, and a little bit of ginger. So it's something that's going to make you put fire in your belly, so to speak. So I've also got sorrel, and I've also got Irish moss, which they call the love potion. But what I do is not only teas, I do juices as well. So I make homemade herbal juices, and I also do the homemade herbal teas. So what I'm going to start doing is when people come into the shop, they can actually tell me what their ailment is, and I'm going to be creating a customized tea for them.
Is heat is applied. This cannot transform into anything else without heat, right? Consider heat in society. What do you think heat can be? If you're an individual, instead of this being wax, this is you. When we are born into a family, we're born in this society. Within that family, there can be dysfunction or function. It can be stable or unstable. It can be anything, and that is going to form of that person's personality. Okay? Whatever the pressure is affects what H2O is. If H2O is in a hot environment, it is steam. If H2O is in a cold environment, it is ice. If H2O is in a balanced environment, then it is water. The same is true of a person. Put them in an environment, they are going to adapt to that environment. Tell a person who they are going to become that person. That's the heat. Okay? Society has arbitrary judgments. You attach labels to yourself, you're going to be judged by that society based on those labels. You call yourself black, everybody identifies with what black should be. Okay? I'm an artist, I'm a creative. What I wanted to do was enter a world where I could be an artist. I like theatre. The first theatre play that I saw was Les Miserables while I was studying to become a barrister. It stuck in me. I wanted to be a barrister because I love the law, jurisprudence of the law, not necessarily in practice, but also because I love the wig and the gown and I like dressing up. That's the truth. Okay? So theatre was the thing for me. And yet, when I approached anyone in the arts industry, poetry, black, rapper, that was who I was told I needed to be. Not theatre. Theatre is not the place for me. Rap is the place for me. I was also told to tell a story because the story of rap was Tupac and Biggie. Tupac had to lie to sell records. He had to pretend that he did come from a single parent, but he had to make out that he was coming from the gangs. That's what they wanted me to be. They forgot. Elected as MP in 1997 because I was the token young black female in his campaign literature. How could I then, whether supported by an art industry or not, pretend to be from a single parent background, coming from a council estate when my father was councillor Nigel Simon Park? Yeah? So I had to go around a long journey, overcoming all the different society, not just the ones from externally, but the ones from family, the ones attached to me because I'm black and what it means and who I should be and what I should do. And the only support structure for me as an artist was one that involved me pretending to be something. And my identity as an artist had to go via carnival. It had to go via anything that they deemed as black. I could be a rapper, but I would be, what's the word, disingenuous. Could not be my authentic self, because that is not who I am. And one of the things that is important to remember as well when I say this, I spent a lot of time studying for the New York Bar. I know what inspired those raps, and I know that I was not living in that. And for me to pretend that I'm living a life that I'm not pretending for a commercial benefit was not going to be right for me. Even though it then provided an obstacle